44,000 years ago, a human being stood inside a cave on a tropical island at the far edge of the world and painted a hunting scene on the wall. Not abstract marks, not hand stencils. A composed narrative, animals, human figures, and something harder to categorize. Hunters who were not entirely human. Part person, part beast, rendered in red ochre on limestone, by a mind capable of imagining things that don't exist in nature. When researchers dated that panel in 2019, it became the oldest known narrative artwork in human history. It was not found in France. It was not found in Spain. It was found in Sulawesi, Indonesia, and it broke the central assumption of 20th century archaeology about where and when the human mind became fully modern. The site is called Liang Bulu Sipong 4. Inside its chambers, a panel depicting native pigs and buffalo being pursued by figures the technical literature calls therianthropes, beings that are simultaneously human and animal. The minimum age returned by uranium-series dating was 43,900 years. Before that publication, the oldest confirmed narrative art on Earth was European. After it, the map of human cognitive history had to be redrawn. Not adjusted at the margins, redrawn from the center outward. To understand the scale of that revision, you have to understand what it replaced. For most of the 20th century, the origin of modern symbolic thought had a location. It was Western Europe. The painted caves of France and Spain, Lascaux, Altamira, Chauvet, were treated as the signal event, the moment the human brain switched on. The behavioral modernity hypothesis positioned this as a localized, relatively recent phenomenon, perhaps 40,000 years ago, in one corner of the world. The assumption wasn't arbitrary. The European caves had survived. The pigments were intact. The images were breathtaking. Scholars working with the best evidence available drew the most logical conclusion from it. When your only data points are in Europe, Europe looks like the origin. Sulawesi didn't just push the date back, it destroyed the geography entirely. Sulawesi itself is not a small or peripheral place. It is one of the largest islands on Earth. Its coastline so jagged and its interior so fractured by mountain ranges and deep bays that different valleys can exist in near complete biological isolation from one another. It sits at the far eastern edge of what was once the Asian continental shelf, separated from the Australian landmass by the deep water channels of the Wallace Line, one of the most significant biogeographic boundaries on Earth, the invisible threshold where the fauna of Asia ends and the fauna of Australasia begins. People have lived there for at least 50,000 years. The caves in the southwestern peninsula, in a region called Maros Pankep, are riddled with limestone karst formations that created natural shelters, and the walls of those shelters are covered in RT. Thousands of images, in multiple panels, produced across multiple generations, across a span of time that turned out to be almost incomprehensibly deep. Local communities had known these caves for generations. Western archaeologists began formally documenting them in the 1950s. But the tools to understand what those images actually meant for human history didn't exist until the 21st century. Paintings were visible for decades before anyone could read what they were saying about time. The scientific framework that unlocked the true age of the Sulawesi paintings is called uranium-series dating. As calcite, the mineral compound in limestone, slowly deposits over painted surfaces, it absorbs trace uranium from groundwater. Uranium decays at a known and measurable rate into thorium. The ratio of uranium to thorium in a calcite crust acts as a clock, telling you the minimum age of whatever lies beneath it. Not the age of the pigment itself, which is harder to date directly, but the age of the crust that formed on top of it, meaning the actual painting is at least that old, and probably older. The technique had existed before it was applied here. It had been used on European sites with significant results. What it had not yet been applied to systematically was Southeast Asia, a region that the broader field had not treated as a likely candidate for deep prehistoric art. That assumption turned out to be one of the most consequential blind spots in modern archaeology. When an Australian-Indonesian research team led by Maxime Aubert and Adam Brum applied this technique to the Maros Pangkep cave complex and published their results in Nature in 2014, the numbers were not what anyone in the room was prepared for. Hand stencils at the site, at least 39,900 years old. A painting of a pig, known as a Sulawesi warty pig, at least 35,400 years old, the oldest figurative art known at that time. The team ran the results more than once. They held the publication back while they checked the methodology, verified the sampling, and considered what they were about to claim. Then they published, and the field responded with the kind of careful, sustained disruption that only happens when the evidence is genuinely unignorable. Pushback came. Scrutiny followed. The dates held. 5 years later, a nearby panel pushed the record further still. Leong Bulu Sipong 4, a hunting scene complete with therianthropic figures, dated to a minimum of 43,900 years. The oldest narrative art on Earth. Not in France, not in Spain, in Indonesia. The debate that followed inside the field was genuine and significant. Some researchers argued for independent evolution of symbolic cognition, that the capacity for this kind of art emerged in multiple populations in the same window of time as our species, spread across the world. Others argued for a single deep origin, carried out of Africa in the genetics of the first modern humans, and expressed wherever conditions allowed art to survive. The European material survived because of limestone cave chemistry in a temperate climate. The Sulawesi material survived barely, and only in specific chambers with specific geological properties. How much didn't survive? That question has no answer, and the shape of that silence is enormous. Every site that was lost to erosion, to rising sea levels at the end of the last ice age, to the acidic humidity of the tropics, to the simple geological violence of 40 millennia, represents evidence we will never recover. The absence of ancient art in a region's archaeological record does not mean ancient art didn't exist there. It means the conditions for survival didn't exist there. The record we have is not the record that existed. It is the fraction that endured. Sulawesi survived. Barely. Therianthropes are the detail that most resists a simple explanation. To paint a being that is simultaneously human and animal is not a representational act. It is a conceptual act. It requires the capacity to imagine categories that don't exist in nature, to hold them in mind simultaneously, and to commit them to a permanent surface with the deliberate intent that the image will carry meaning beyond the moment of its creation. That cognitive architecture, the foundation of mythology, of religion, of fiction, of symbolic language itself, was operating at full capacity in a cave in Sulawesi 44,000 years ago. The same conceptual form appears in Europe in the same narrow window of time. The Lion Man of Hohenstein-Stadel, a human figure carved in mammoth ivory with a lion's head, dates to approximately 40,000 years ago in what is now Germany. Two sites separated by 10,000 kilometers of ocean and mountain range, producing the same cognitive leap, the same deliberate fusion of human and animal identity within the same narrow band of geological time. That parallel is one of the most haunting unresolved problems in the archaeology of the human mind. It cannot be coincidence. It does not yet have a fully satisfying explanation. The two leading possibilities, that the capacity traveled with modern humans out of Africa and found expression simultaneously wherever populations settled, or that something was happening to human cognition across a wide geographic range at roughly the same moment, are both extraordinary. Neither closes the question completely. Ancient DNA has begun to sketch the population background, though it has not yet fully resolved the question of who specifically made these images. The people most likely to have been in Sulawesi 44,000 years ago carried ancestry closely related to present-day indigenous Australians and Papuans, populations whose lineages in this part of the world extend back to the earliest dispersal of modern humans out of Africa, and whose continuous presence in the region represents one of the longest, unbroken human habitation stories on Earth. Their ancestors were moving through the island chains of Southeast Asia and crossing into the Sahul landmass, the joined Australia-New Guinea continent that existed when sea levels were significantly lower. At precisely the same time, these paintings were being made on cave walls in Maros Pengkep. The genetic story of Southeast Asia is extraordinarily complex, with layer upon layer of subsequent migration blending into the existing populations over the millennia that followed. Farming populations moved in, and trade networks redistributed ancestry across the archipelago. The modern inhabitants of Sulawesi carry a palimpsest of movements that took tens of thousands of years to accumulate, but the time depth of the Sulawesi paintings points toward those earliest layers, toward people whose descendants walked across a land bridge into what became Australia, while this art was still fresh on the walls. The painters of Liang Bulu Sipong IV may have been biological relatives of the first Australians. Their descendants are alive today, and that is not a metaphor. It is a genetic fact with a 44,000-year thread running through it. The paintings are not surviving well. The calcite that preserved them for 44,000 years is flaking. Humidity fluctuations associated with regional climate shifts are accelerating the process in ways that were not fully anticipated when the sites were first documented. Researchers have recorded visible deterioration between survey visits, panels intact on one trip showing measurable surface loss on the next. The problem is not hypothetical or gradual in the way that most conservation language implies. It is active, it is measurable, and it is accelerating. What survived 400 centuries of geological time may not survive another 2 or 3 decades of inaction. The oldest art ever made by human hands is disappearing on timescales that make the lack of coordinated international conservation response something close to a scandal. The sites are remote, the funding is fragmented, and the institutional will has not matched the scale of what is at stake. The resources committed to halting that deterioration are not, by any serious accounting, proportionate to what is being lost. The window is narrowing, and it has been narrowing since the first research team walked in with dating equipment and realized what they were standing in front of. What the Sulawesi paintings demand of us, ultimately, is a revised understanding of our own story. The origin of human symbolic thought is not a European event. It is a human event, deep, distributed, and ancient in ways that the 20th century framework was not built to accommodate. The bias was not malicious. It was a product of which evidence survived and who had the tools to find it first. But the revision it requires is real, and it is total. Every model that treated behavioral modernity as a late and localized spark needs to reckon with a hunting scene in a limestone cave in Indonesia that predates Lascaux by more than 4,000 years. The people who painted those hunting scenes 44,000 years ago were not early experiments in the direction of modernity. They were not proto-humans groping towards something. They were fully modern minds, doing what fully modern minds do, making meaning, telling stories, imagining things that don't exist, and leaving them on walls for whoever came next. They understood, at some level, that neither archaeology nor genetics has yet fully characterized, that a surface could outlast a moment. They chose the right surface. We are whoever came next. We are still only barely finding them.